Well, Dr. Charan Singh, the Chief Executive of eGrow Foundation and an eminent economist, is with us. He's an expert on international trade and investment. He's joining us via Zoom link. Thank you very much, Dr. Charan Singh. So, these are cumulative investments if we look at this Motilal Oswal report. And the pace surely is impressive. We're seeing that the Indian economy, however, is valued at only around 3.9%, $3.9 trillion, I beg your pardon, in terms of nominal value. So when one looks at $8 trillion of investment, one wonders whether, it's fallen short of return.
No, it's not like that. See, the investment is an annual thing, and this is happening annually. Whereas when you look at and accumulative over a period of time, as you computed it over 75 years, and you said 8 trillion now, in total 14 trillion earlier, so that's an accumulated part. But when you talk about income, income is an annual figure. So the GDP is an annual accounting figure.
Yes.
So therefore, the comparison as such would be probably difficult. But as you know, that in the last few years, especially after COVID, the government has made a very important initiative, very strong. The capital expenditure has almost doubled from 1.6% of GDP to 3.4% of GDP. That has a great multiplier effect, and that also attracts lots of private investment. So effectively, I would like to say that investment in the last 10 years has certainly been going up. And you know the reasons why it has been going up. Some of the very important reasons are, of course, government's initiatives that it came up with, the National Infrastructure Plan that also encouraged the private sector to come in, the Gati Shakti Plan that also encouraged, the implementation of the goods and services tax, one country, one tax sort of an initiative also played a very important role. So then the issue is that over a period of time, because the government has been taking great initiatives in terms of capital expenditure itself. Your own
Sure.
slides showed where is the investment taking place. It's taking place mainly in infrastructure. And you know, infrastructure then has great multiplier effect. Roads
Absolutely.
are being built, railway lines are being built, and you'll be surprised. New airports are being built. You'll be
Yes.
very surprised. I was at Hisar yesterday, and at Hisar, they're coming out with a new airport. It's almost ready, and it has
Okay.
the capacity to land 737. So that's the type of infrastructure in
Right.
which this government is investing. And that is
Absolutely.
why you see that the thrust on infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, airports, that is the cause that you
Okay.
find that there's investment surge taking place. That actually is also encouraging, supporting the high growth rate that the economy is recording.
Absolutely. Dr. Charan Singh, so we're talking about a 7% growth rate being maintained. But, by market capitalization, if you look at this Motilal Oswal report, and, if you just look at the kind of market capitalization of all our stocks and shares, the Indian economy is already valued at over about $5.4 trillion or something like that. But the pace of investment is likely to continue over the next 5 years, it says. So another $8 trillion is going to come in. Are we likely to see this transform our GDP in nominal terms? Because we are looking to become a $5 trillion economy and, overtake both Japan and Germany and become the third largest economy in the world.
Absolutely. If you look at the growth trajectory that India has had, for the last few years, we're already the fastest growing economy in the world. Now, there is nothing that's going to stop us because the policies are in place. The capital expenditure, which has set a threshold of investment, that's in place. Given the capital output ratio, obviously this translates into growth. That is in place. Over and above all this, the consumption pressure, you can supply anything, but there has to be demand for it. The consumption pressure comes from the demand side.
Right.
And in the country, given the market size that we have, huge market size that we have, the technological strength that we have, I'm sure that GDP growth is going to continue the way it is growing. The middle class is strong, the defense budget is getting strong, and we are playing an important role there. The Make in India is also another factor that's very, very important. I want
Okay.
to mention one factor which I think is very important, and that is the stability of the government and the policies that the government is pursuing. As you
Okay.
would have noticed, in most of the countries, major countries, there's been a change in the government. We have just seen the American election itself. But
Right.
here in our country, there's important political stability, which is ensuring that the economy is good, there is financial stability in the system. So, given these factors, the young demographic you already know,
Yes.
given these factors which I have mentioned, and given the demand which has been created or sustained demand, I would visualize India will, and there are projections by the IMF which has shown that India will be the fastest growing economy for the next 5 years. To
Okay.
be the fastest growing economy, to sustain a 7% growth, and I would expect a much higher growth, as the Commerce Minister just said, that despite all odds, we are maintaining our exports tempo. What does it translate into? It
Okay.
translates into heavy production in the country taking place and
Okay.
nothing stopping it. So, in the
Sure.
next 5 years, I look at the trajectory which is going to be positive, strong. 7% is the general prediction being made by the RBI and others, but I would expect a much higher growth at that level.
All right.
So, given that, then the investment also would translate into, I think, much higher investment in the next 5 years.
Fair enough. Dr. Charan Singh, also, so India is on track then, according to what you're saying, to become the third largest economy soon. But how much of this growth, you did mention exports, is going to come from increasing our global footprint? And, how do we see this happening?
So, to me, this is going to happen in various ways. First, of course, the traditional exports which we are going to be doing. We already have a digital footprint. Our UPI is now very well known. So, therefore, on the digital front, we are doing already very well. The Prime Minister has continuously emphasized on tourism sector also. So I am expecting that within the country, tourism is going to continue to play a very important role in days to come. So along with our traditional exports, along with tourism that will play an important role, the digital footprint that we have already done, I expect the India's exports and India's growth to
Okay.
be really, really strong. The young demographic India that we have, the startup India that we have in the startup, we have already established ourselves with many iconic startups. I again expect a very strong growth up there. So,
Okay.
given these, and then as I just mentioned, the
Right.
infrastructure which has already been established, illustratively the Hisar airport which is coming up and should be operational in 3 months, these sort of infrastructure projects which are lying hidden spread across the country, not recorded, not really recognized. As they come up, you would find that the opportunities for growth are going to expand. Each of these infrastructure projects, they have they have a multiplier impact.
Yes.
Going back to Hisar as an illustration,
Yes.
because of the airport coming up, there's an industrial hub expected in the neighborhood of Hisar. This is the first airport in Haryana which will be operational in the hinterland. And they were telling me that the
Yes.
railway track is ready and that
Okay.
railway track can become operational along with the airport. So, such infrastructure projects are potential
Okay.
output multipliers.
Sure, certainly. Dr. Charan Singh, do stay with us for our next story as well. We'll expect your views. This is about Africa, which is rich in minerals. Its median age is also around 19 years, so it's a young country, a young continent. And the African Continental Free Trade Area, it also creates a single market for goods and services. Then there's the African Union, which is aiming to bring about African unity. And now the G20 presidency has shifted to South Africa, and the African Union is a permanent member of the G20, thanks mostly to India. So it's an opportunity then for African issues to shape global agenda in the next year. Let's look at this report. Africa has immense economic potential due to its rich resources, young population, and regional integration. It's a major producer of minerals, oil, gas, and agricultural products. This potential will be highlighted as South Africa takes over the G20 presidency.
Africa is our home, and we are going to seek to make this G20 an Africa-focused G20.
Cyril Ramaphosa, however, faces protests and potential impeachment over the Farmgate scandal at home. Africa's median age is 19, driving economic growth. The African Union and African Continental Free Trade Area create a single market, boosting intra-Africa trade and investment. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Nigeria recently ahead of the G20 meeting in Rio to boost South-South cooperation. Africa has 40% of the world's gold and up to 90% of its chromium and platinum. The largest reserves of cobalt, diamonds, platinum and uranium are in Africa. It holds 65% of the world's arable land and 10% of the planet's internal renewable freshwater source. Despite the African Union and unity talks, Africa faces political instability. In Uganda, protesters are demanding government accountability, while President Museveni warns against protests, accusing some of foreign interference. This reflects the political landscape in 17 out of 48 African countries. Political uncertainty is compounded by hasty clean energy decisions like the closing of South Africa's Eskom thermal plant without assessing economic and livelihood impacts.
Considering the time lapse between the shutdown and what is happening currently, but Eskom is doing everything in its power to ensure that this doesn't turn into a ghost town.
North Africa, especially Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt and Libya, has climates ideal for olive cultivation. Africa also boasts a growing tech industry, renewable energy and mobile tech. Urbanization is driving growth in construction, services and manufacturing. A growing middle class is driving demand for quality clothing and fashion items. Fashion and culture also brings unity to a vast continent that has much diversity but plenty in similarity.
I feel like we need to start celebrating one another and not allow certain barriers to get in between us. I feel like we let minor things like where are your parents from, where you're born, what language you speak, and all these things sort of like get in the way of us uniting together.
The next 12 months should position Africa as a key player in the global economy, with the potential to significantly improve living standards and drive sustainable development. The Economic Brief, DD India. Well, let's turn to Dr. Charan Singh once again. Dr. Charan Singh, do you see, a big opportunity for Africa to bring in investments while South Africa is the president of G20?
Absolutely, absolutely. You remember 2 years back when we were the president, we held the presidency of G20, the advantages it has. We were able to showcase our culture to the rest of the world, and most of the world leaders came here, and we had all type of activities within our country. We also involved the think tanks. We also had discussed about the new international economic order. Remember the report by Larry Summers and N.K. Singh? We were able to, in a great way, able to showcase to the world our inclusive growth and the Prime Minister's concept of life. So I think we took great advantage of it. On the same lines, after us it went to Brazil, another emerging country, and then South Africa, another emerging country. South Africa is a potential gold mine for the rest of the world and for India too. And I think the South Africans, as your report was just showing, they are not going to let this opportunity go away easily. They have much to offer to the world, rightly so. But I must also say it's the foresightedness of the Prime Minister that we were able to bring in the African Union as part of the G20. Now, while South Africa holds the presidency, the fact that the window was provided by India endears India to Africa.
Absolutely. So let me bring in a question here, Dr. Charan Singh, about India. What role do you see Indian investments playing in Africa? India is already big in telecom. There could be sectors like, mining, precious metals, banking, pharmaceuticals. Also, there's the demographic dividend. India is also young. The African continent is young. How best can all this be utilized?
Very correct. India and India and Africa as a continent and will enjoy greater synergy in days to come. The Prime Minister's visit to Nigeria is also a very strategic visit, and I think a very important visit is set a really good threshold level of relationship building up here. As far as the opportunities are concerned, while India's digital stamp across the world is being recognized, of course, its stamp in Africa obviously will also spread. But I'll share something with you
Right.
because you raised this issue of a demographic dividend that India is enjoying, even Africa will enjoy. It's a very young country. Two-thirds of its population is below 40 years. Just imagine how strong this country is. But also remember, in these 40 odd countries in Africa,
Yeah.
there are some challenges.
Absolutely.
And this is where I think India has a great potential role to play. One of the challenges is, you remember our Jan Dhan Yojana, which
Yes.
we did under Jam Trinity on a
Right,
mission mode,
right.
which the Prime Minister announced from the ramparts of Red Fort.
Yes.
Similar financial inclusion is required in Africa.
Okay.
Their growth, inclusive growth, the potential of Jandan is
Right.
massive, and they have to learn from us. Secondly,
Yes.
given their school education and their university education, which is fragmented and broken, and school dropouts are very many,
Okay. So,
India's growth, India's contribution to education in Africa can play a very prominent role.
right.
Also, the digital stamp on education that we have, we can provide online education that can
Sure.
also make a great headway into Africa.
I'm
So I think
afraid we've run short of time, Dr. Charan Singh, but I think you've given us a clear idea about many areas of cooperation between India and the African continent, which is only likely to increase over time. Thanks very much for being with us